Hello, my name's Alex, and for years, my sister never missed a chance to poke fun at my so-called government job. She'd roll her eyes at family gatherings, make little jokes about me pushing paper all day, and everyone else would just laugh along. I stayed quiet, letting them believe whatever they wanted, until the day of our family reunion, when the roar of engines filled the sky, and Air Force One landed right next to us. The envelope was cream-colored, thick, and smelled faintly of cedar, like it had been sitting in my grandfather's desk for years. My sister's name was written in bold cursive across the top, mine tucked under it as if I were an afterthought. A breeze slid in through the half-open kitchen window, carrying the faint scent of cut grass from the neighbor's yard. Somewhere outside, a lawnmower droned and a late summer cricket chirped, steady as a metronome. Labor Day sale ads crackled faintly from the radio I'd forgotten to turn off, a cheery voice listing discounts on patio furniture. It was the sort of day that begged for peach cobbler cooling on a windowsill, the kind Grandpa used to eat straight from the pan with a spoon, claiming it tasted better that way. I turned the envelope over in my hands, tracing the embossed return address of the old Carter homestead. My thumb hesitated at the flap. The last time I'd walked into that house, Emily had been holding court at the dining table, a glass of wine in hand, telling our cousins about the little desk job I supposedly had. Every laugh had been like a pinprick under my skin. Grandpa's voice from last month's call pressed in from the edges of memory. You can't keep avoiding them forever, Alex. He'd said it lightly, but there was weight beneath. He didn't know the real reason I'd stayed away, no one did. My work didn't lend itself to explanations, and the clearance level meant even my own family would never be in the loop. I slid a finger under the flap and pulled out the heavy cardstock. Gold lettering announced the Carter family reunion, complete. With a full-color photo of the farmhouse under a bright Nebraska sky. The names were printed in an almost theatrical flourish, Emily Carter and Alexander Carter. The end looked like it had been squeezed in at the last minute. The apartment around me was spare by design, no clutter, no personal touches beyond a single framed photo of Grandpa in his Air Force uniform on the shelf. My laptop sat on the table, lid half closed, its surface reflecting the faint glint of a small stack of classified folders. A manila cover sheet with bold black lettering, confidential, peeked out before I slid it fully under the laptop. The landline rang, its tone low and familiar. I picked up, already knowing who it would be. Alex, it's your grandpa, he said, voice warm but edged with that subtle command that decades in uniform never wash away. Got the invitation yet? I did, I said, turning the card between my fingers. Well, good. Emily's been helping with the guest list. Says she hopes you'll come this time. I could hear the pause in his voice, the unspoken I hope you will, too. I'm thinking about it, I replied, keeping my tone even. You know, he said, peach season's still hanging on. I might just bake one of those cobblers you like. That tugged at something deep. I glanced at the old Weather Channel on the muted TV across the room, sun icons scattered across Nebraska, farmers being interviewed about the coming harvest. It was a picture postcard. September. After we hung up, I sat for a moment, the card in my lap. My eyes drifted to a photo propped on the shelf, a much younger me in a sundress, standing next to Emily at one of those long-ago picnics. Even then, she had that easy way of drawing every spotlight in her direction. I'd been content to stand at the edge, unnoticed, but things were different now. I closed the laptop with a decisive click, the hum of its cooling fan fading. From the drawer, I took out a small, metal object, cool against my palm, and slipped it into my jacket pocket. Its weight was familiar, reassuring. See you soon, Grandpa, I said aloud, voice carrying a mix of warmth and a trace of caution. My eyes flicked to the high-level security ID lying face up on the table, the bold clearance seal catching the light. The highway stretched flat for miles, golden fields swaying under a pale blue sky. Alex hadn't driven this road in over a decade. The air shimmered just above the asphalt in the afternoon warmth, and the steady hum of the tires against the pavement felt both familiar and foreign. She eased the car into the right lane, the open road giving way to occasional clusters of mailboxes and weathered barns leaning into the wind. On the passenger seat sat a paper map she didn't need. GPS was on her phone, but she liked the weight of it, the way it made the journey feel tangible. In the center console, tucked under a folded receipt, was an old photograph, Alex at 10 years old, grinning with a gap-toothed smile beside a faded aircraft at the Offutt Air Force Base Museum. Grandpa had slipped it into her wallet years ago, saying, just so you remember where you came from. She'd left it there ever since. By the time she saw the hand-painted sign for Mabel's Diner, best pie in the county, the fuel gauge was flirting with a quarter tank. She pulled off at the next exit, coasting past a self-service gas station where a teenager in a ball cap filled up a battered pickup, country music blaring from the open windows. The diner sat at the edge of a gravel lot, its chrome trim gleaming in the sun. Inside, the air was cool with the hum of ceiling fans, smelling of strong coffee, bacon grease, and something sweet baking in the back. The booths were red vinyl, cracked at the corners, each table topped with a small vase of plastic daisies. Alex slid into a booth near the window. The waitress, short, silver-haired, and brisk, poured her a steaming cup before she could ask. "Refills are on the house, hon, you want a menu?" "Just coffee for now," Alex said, though her eyes lingered. On the chalkboard listing today's pies. A voice came from behind the counter. "Well, if it isn't little Alex Carter." She turned to see Mrs. Mabel herself, hair pulled back in a neat bun, gold-rimmed glasses perched low on her nose. She wore a navy cardigan despite the warm day, and her eyes were sharp in a way that made people stand a little straighter. "I almost didn't recognize you without your pigtails," Mabel said, wiping her hands on a dish towel as she came over. "Lord, it's been, what, 15 years?" "Closer to 12, Alex said with a small smile. Mabel slid into the seat opposite her without asking, as if no time had passed. "Your grandpa still keeping busy?" "I swear that man has more energy than folks half his age." "He's doing well," Alex replied. They talked lightly at first, harvests, the dry summer, the price of gas. But then Mabel's tone shifted, her eyes narrowing just slightly. "I heard you were working in something important a few years back. We had a situation in town, you wouldn't remember, but a certain security team came through. Professional bunch. Tight-lipped. You remind me of them." Alex took a slow sip of her coffee. "I've been keeping busy," she said, leaving the words open-ended. Mabel's mouth quirked, as if she recognized the deflection but wouldn't push. "Busy's good." When the waitress came back, Alex ordered a slice of apple pie. The crust was flaky, the filling warm and spiced with cinnamon, exactly the way she remembered. She finished every bite, then asked for a jar of peach preserves from the small display near the register. "That's for your grandpa?" Mabel asked. Alex nodded. "He always liked them." At the counter, Mabel pulled out a worn leather wallet, counted bills with practiced fingers, and laid them neatly on the table, exact change for her coffee and a 20% tip, just as she always had. She handed Alex her change for the preserves with a firm handshake. "Don't be a stranger, Alex." Alex stepped back into the sun, the jar of preserves wrapped in a paper bag under her arm. As she pulled out of the gravel lot, she caught sight of Mabel in the diner window, leaning toward one of the younger waitresses. Even through the glass, Alex could read her lips. "That girl's got a story." Her phone buzzed in the cup holder. One glance at the screen showed a secure messaging app, its interface plain except for the single line of text. "Confirm arrival time." The Carter Farm's oak tree had stood for over a century, its thick trunk gnarled and strong, roots gripping the Nebraska soil like they owned it. Its sprawling branches cast a dappled shade wide enough to cover the long picnic table beneath it, where red and white checkered cloth rippled gently in the late September breeze. Beyond the yard, the sky stretched open and endless, the muted hum of tractors in the distance blending with children's laughter. Alex stepped out of her car and took in the scene, mason jars of lemonade sweating in the afternoon warmth, platters of deviled eggs and potato salad, a peach cobbler cooling on the porch rail. Under a makeshift game setup, kids tossed beanbags toward wooden boards, shouting points in a spirited cornhole match. The air smelled faintly of cut hay, charcoal smoke, and cinnamon sugar. Grandpa sat at the head of the table, his white hair catching the sunlight, with a stack of index cards in front of him. He was squinting down at them like they were classified military plans instead of a speech for the 50th Carter family reunion. Alex walked over, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Need a proofreader?" His weathered face lit up. "Always. These old eyes don't see the small print so well anymore." She slid into the bench beside him, scanning his neat block handwriting. The words were heartfelt, about the family's history, about perseverance through hard seasons, and about the farm as the glue that held them together. But here and there, she made quiet adjustments, moving a phrase for better rhythm, softening an old grudge mentioned in passing. "Under that tree," Grandpa said softly, "the family's been telling stories for generations. I figured this year, I'd tell one more." Alex smiled, but the warmth was broken a moment later by a familiar voice. Well, if it isn't my little sister, fixing someone else's work," Emily said, balancing a glass of lemonade in one hand and a knowing smirk on her face. She was dressed for casual perfection, crisp jeans, a cream sweater, hair styled like she'd walked out of a salon that morning. "Still at that office job, Alex? Shuffling papers for a living?" Several relatives looked over, waiting for the exchange. Alex's instinct was to deflect. She smoothed the corner of one of Grandpa's index cards and said lightly, "Harvest is looking good this year, isn't it?" Corn came in strong. Her uncle chimed in about the weather patterns, and the moment passed for most of the group, but not for Grandpa. He glanced at Alex from beneath his brows, the corner of his mouth tight in a way that said he'd noticed more than he let on. As the afternoon wore on, the older relatives settled into lawn chairs under the oak's shade, swapping stories about the B-52 runs that used to thunder overhead from off it. They described the tremble of windows, the way you could feel the engines in your bones before you ever saw the planes. Alex listened quietly, sipping iced tea, watching the sky through the leaves. Then, just as her aunt brought out another tray of deviled eggs, a low rumble rolled across the fields. It grew, steady and sure, until even the children stopped there. Game to glance up, Grandpa tilted his head, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Practice runs," he murmured. "You never forget that sound." Emily laughed, raising her glass. "See? Even Grandpa says it's just practice. Nothing important ever happens here." Alex's gaze followed the distant shape cutting across the horizon, sunlight flashing on its wings. She narrowed her eyes, saying nothing, her mind already measuring the angle of approach and the sound pattern. Somewhere deep inside, instinct stirred, the kind she hadn't used in a long time. The sky had been calm all afternoon, a wide blue bowl over the Nebraska fields, when a deep, rolling thunder cut through the air like a blade. It was louder than the practice runs Grandpa had mentioned the other day, lower, heavier, with a kind of urgency you could feel in your chest. Conversations at the picnic table halted mid-sentence. Forks hovered above plates. Even the kids stopped tossing their beanbags and looked toward the horizon. Alex froze for half a heartbeat, her ears sorting through the sound. That wasn't a training flight. It was layered, jet engines in a staggered approach pattern, rotors in the mix. She set down her fork, the half-eaten peach cobbler on her plate already forgotten. From the porch, Grandpa slowly pushed himself up from his chair and reached for the old black binoculars he kept on a hook by the door. "That's no crop duster," he said, scanning the sky. His voice had the kind of certainty that made people listen. Emily leaned out from under the oak, shielding her eyes with one hand. "What in the world is that? Some air show?" The noise grew louder, sharper, until a glint of white and blue appeared over the tree line. Alex's phone buzzed in her pocket. She slipped it out and saw a single encrypted text, "Secure perimeter." Her jaw tightened. She pushed back from the table, already moving toward the fence that bordered the Carter farm from the service road to the old auxiliary runway. She didn't bother explaining. Years of training clicked into place like gears. "Alex." Grandpa's voice followed her. "You know something?" She glanced back, but her answer was swallowed by the sudden appearance of a dust-covered Ford truck pulling up fast along the fence. A man in a sheriff's department windbreaker jumped out, scanning the property. He spotted her and came straight over. "Ma'am, you Carter?" he asked, eyes narrowing when he saw her steady gaze. "Alex Carter," she confirmed, low-voiced. "What's your patch on comms?" He blinked at her clipped tone, then answered, "County's on the line with the Air Force. They told us to lock this area down." "You with?" "Federal," Alex cut in, already slipping into command mode. "I need your outer cordon to keep the locals back." No one passed the fence. By now, cousins, uncles, and a handful of neighbors had gathered along the property edge, pointing toward the sky. A few kids were bouncing with excitement, their parents trying to keep them from climbing the fence. The engines roared louder, the distinct profile of a massive Boeing 747 filling the afternoon light. Emily's voice carried over the murmurs. "Wait, why does that look like?" It was unmistakable now, the polished blue and white livery. The United States of America lettering along the fuselage, the presidential seal gleaming on the tail. Air Force One was descending, flanked by two dark green helicopters, Marine ones, sweeping in like shadows. The scene pulled the whole farm into stunned silence. Grandpa, binoculars pressed to his eyes, muttered something under his breath that Alex couldn't catch. The sheriff's deputy adjusted his cap. "Never seen them use the AUX strip since, well, ever." As the landing gear locked into place with a visible flash of hydraulics, Alex shrugged off her light jacket. The late-day wind caught the fabric, revealing the lanyard clipped to her belt, dark blue, with a gold-trimmed badge and the unmistakable markings of a high-level federal security clearance. Emily's eyes locked on it. Her expression shifted. From curiosity to shock, her mouth opening as if to speak, but no words came. Alex didn't look back. Her focus was on the runway and the aircraft now taxiing toward them, the thunder of its engines rattling the ground beneath their feet. The wind carried the faint smell of jet fuel across the field as the Boeing 747 slowed to a crawl on the auxiliary runway. The rotors of the two Marine One helicopters beat the air in a steady rhythm, hovering at a safe distance. A line of black SUVs was already moving into position, their headlights cutting through the golden wash of the sunset. A man in a dark suit and sunglasses stepped toward the fence, one hand pressed to the earpiece coiled behind his ear. He scanned the area with quick, precise movements, then turned his gaze to Alex. "Ma'am, your lead." His voice was low but carried weight. enough that the chatter among the gathered onlookers went still. Alex didn't hesitate. She stepped forward, unclipped the ID from her belt, and held it up briefly for verification. The agent gave a sharp nod. Close the gate. Establish perimeter control from the east line to the access road, she instructed, her tone crisp. Her voice carried a level of authority that left no doubt she was used to giving orders, and having them followed. Two deputies from the county sheriff's department moved quickly to comply, pulling the sliding farm gate shut and chaining it. A portable barricade was rolled into place by another agent. Through the murmuring crowd, Emily's voice floated out, tinged with disbelief. She's giving orders to them? Grandpa's eyes didn't leave Alex. A slow smile formed on his weathered face, the kind that came from recognition, not surprise. He placed a steady hand on Emily's shoulder. She's been doing more than you thought, kiddo. Alex lifted her radio. Falcon to command, perimeter secure. Advise motorcade. Status. Copy, Falcon. Motorcade holding. POTUS on final approach to stair unit, came the reply, crisp and immediate. The name, Falcon, was repeated softly by a few in the crowd. It sounded like a call sign, the sort of thing reserved for people who worked in places most folks would never see. At the fence line, a mix of Secret Service and local officers formed a neat cordon. A few neighbors raised their phones to film, only to be politely told to keep their devices down. Emily shifted uneasily, leaning toward a cousin. This can't be real. Alex works in some office job. She's not. Before she could finish, a tall man in another dark suit, his lapel pin glinting with the presidential seal, stepped forward, stopping just a few feet from Alex. Ma'am, he said, meeting her eyes with clear respect, without you, this wouldn't be possible. Today. Emily blinked, caught between skepticism and the undeniable reality unfolding before her. From the aircraft, the mobile stairs had been rolled into place. The seal of the President of the United States gleamed under the fading light. Grandpa straightened. Instinctively, his old Air Force cap in one hand. Though he hadn't been in uniform for decades, his spine was as straight as any man on parade. The door of Air Force One opened. A silhouette appeared against the glow inside, then descended the steps with measured, deliberate strides. The president paused at the bottom, scanning the small sea of faces before his gaze landed on Alex. A faint, knowing smile crossed his face. He inclined his head in acknowledgement. Alex returned the gesture with a small tilt of her head, professional, measured, without a hint of self-congratulation. From somewhere behind her, Emily drew a sharp breath, as if the ground beneath her had just shifted. The truth was no longer something she could deny. It was standing right in front of her, shaking hands with her sister. The peach cobbler on Alex's plate had gone cold, the crust now soft from the sweet peach syrup pooling underneath. But no one seemed to care about dessert anymore. The picnic table under the old oak tree was quieter than it had been all afternoon, conversations hushed, the air thick with the unspoken weight of what everyone had just witnessed. Grandpa sat at the head of the table, his weathered hands resting over his folded Air Force cap. The string lights above swayed gently in the evening breeze, casting warm circles of light on faces still trying to reconcile the Alex they thought they knew with the one who had just been saluted by the President of the United States. Emily cleared her throat, her hands wrapped tight around a mason jar of sweet iced tea. Alex. Her voice was softer than usual, stripped of the teasing edge it always carried. I owe you an apology. She glanced down at the table for a moment, then looked her sister in the eye. I didn't. I never knew. I'm sorry for how I talked to you before. Alex let the moment settle before answering. It's all right, she said, her tone steady but warm. We all have parts of our lives we keep to ourselves. I never wanted my work to be the thing that defined me with family. She reached for her glass and took a slow sip, then smiled slightly. Besides, Grandpa would rather we talk about him than about me. That drew a few chuckles from the older relatives. Grandpa shook his head but didn't hide the pride in his eyes. Well, if you insist, he said, pulling a folded sheet of paper from his shirt pocket. I think now's as good a time as any for my speech. The murmurs faded as he stood, the string lights catching the silver in his hair. He adjusted his glasses, looked around the table, and began. He spoke of growing up on this land, of family reunions where the food was plenty but the stories were richer, of lessons learned from both good years and hard ones. His voice carried the easy cadence of someone who'd lived what he was saying, the words more worn than rehearsed. Family, he said, his gaze moving from one face to the next, isn't just about blood. It's about respect, about seeing the best in each other, even when you don't understand the whole picture. He glanced at Alex, his smile small but knowing. And it's about remembering you never judge someone by what you think you know. By the time he finished, the entire table was on their feet, the applause ringing out under the branches of the oak. A few people reached across to shake Alex's hand. Others simply nodded at her with a quiet acknowledgement that meant more than Words, Grandpa poured tea from an old glass pitcher, the kind he'd been using since the 70s, topping off cups like nothing extraordinary had just happened. Emily passed Alex the last slice of warm apple pie from a covered dish, as if it were her way of saying they could start over. As laughter and small talk began to fill the air again, Alex leaned back slightly, letting the hum of voices and the glow of the string lights wrap around her. Out beyond the tree line, the faint lights of Air Force One moved farther into the night sky. She smiled to herself, the cool September air brushing against her face. Some things, she thought, are worth coming home for. Under the glow of the string lights, the evening had settled into a gentle hush, the kind that only comes when hearts are a little fuller and eyes see more clearly. What began as an ordinary family gathering had turned into a quiet reminder that worth isn't worn on a uniform or announced in a title, it's carried in the way we live and treat others. In life, kindness has a way of finding its way back to us, often from the places we least expect, once we lay down our judgments. And perhaps, just as a lamp in the window guides a traveler home, a single act of understanding can light the way for someone still searching. If this story touched your heart, maybe it's worth passing that light along to someone who needs it tonight.